Fate is called as such, for it cannot be changed, nor can it be reversed. It can only but be accepted.
Have you ever actually considered what in the world fates are? They're meant for wishing, yeah, but in the grand scheme of Genshin's story, what do they really mean? On one hand, when you receive a character, it's to be expected that there's an alternate universe they start journeying with you physically. This is why character voice lines and information we find in the stories are still considered as canon. But on the other hand, you arrive in cutscenes and they don't actually follow you. In one universe, Zhao and the Traveler are fated to go to the Lantern Rite, but on the other, he rejects their invitation and the Traveler goes to the Lantern Rite alone. I personally don't have an answer to this question, but it is an interesting topic. In my opinion, the active lore of wishing versus the active lore of the Archon quests should be seen as two separate things. Two separate, yet canon universes in which the Traveler either failed or succeeded to intertwine their fate. Faith in Genshin Impact is a funny word. It's the combination of all the characters' destinies as though they were preordained as it is. In Teyvatian mythos, constellations are the closest definition of one's past, present, and future. The constellations can be seen and read by those that are trained, and they will give an insight into both the current state and what might happen to the person. How fate is chosen for the characters is unknown, but what we do know is that the gods might be the one watching over the maintenance of this fate. Celestia, or the island in the sky, is known for its absolute lawfulness and adherence to divine law. There was a time that humanity had tested the fate destined to them, and Celestia punished them greatly. Fate has constantly been referenced as absolute, unchanging, and undisturbed. If a character is fated to a certain thing, then divine powers are making it so that the character's actions, life, and interactions all lead up to that one fateful encounter. It's a weird thing to consider, and pretty sad if you think about it. If you learn that a character's fate is one riddled with death or destruction, you end up appreciating them more, but understand that it's an inevitable truth and that they will disappear for good. Additionally, if a character is fated for good, does that mean that their goodness isn't completely of their own volition, but instead mandated by some unknown force and therefore inauthentic? See, that's the problem with having divine powers play such a big role in a person's life. The true beauty of the world disappears when you know that at some point, everything that you do has already been decided for you. Or is it? Because fate is a weird thing. We never had any true confirmation that fate is meant to be absolute, only that there's a chance it can be read. This is why we have characters like Venti and Mona who are vaguely alluding to knowing the future of characters. But what if we introduce a character that can defy fate itself? How would that person come into play, and what would happen with the word fate? The Traveler throughout the series has had several connections to the word fate. First is by design. An interesting coincidence is that both Aether and Lamine share the same four-pointed star design motif as someone like Paimon and the Sustainer, both allegedly godlike characters that exceed mortal restrictions. But the four-pointed star design can be seen on someone like Mona as well, who has both the compass star-like design and the four-pointed star design. Mona is an astrologist capable of reading one's fate through hydromancy. If the four-pointed star is supposed to represent something along the lines of fate, then these characters being brought together would be interesting. Second is that the Traveler had always been an enigma in terms of respecting both Celestia and Teyvatian rules. A has said that the Traveler is an exception to eternity in reference to them defying God, and the Traveler's entire personality revolves around the defiance of preordained fate. One of the biggest examples of this was their war against the fate of their homeworld. The Travelers came from a world that was ravaged by a fate of destruction. The sword of dissension is given to those that could defy that destiny. When this sword was last drawn, humankind was trying to preserve a doomed world. That world was their last and only home. This sword was drawn to defy that fate of destruction, but to draw steel against the law of the universe, that all who exist must one day perish. Surely it must have seemed the height of folly. But really, when one is faced with such a final fate, when up against the star-devouring darkness, what weapon would be fitting for one to wield? It can only be a sword. If nothing else, it shall bear the memory of those who faced their ends without fear. The traveler's capabilities to redefine fate also seem to be expanded with the intertwined and quaint wishes. When you're wishing, it's unknown whether it's Paimon or the traveler manipulating fate itself, but it's safe to assume that it's the traveler's doing. This is because of the aspect of companionship and meeting under the stars. The traveler themselves are stars, and the wishing system is basically a nod to the prospect of wishing stars from our world. But we can go further than that. When the traveler leaves the world to arrive to the Vat, a mysterious person by the name of KK gives them one final message. As long as your attitude of nobleness and kindness do not change, in the new world, there will always be best companions to travel with you. Where you are going ahead and where your future lies, your new world will unfold before you. Welcome to the world. When reading the lore behind the wishing system, you get the following descriptions. Its glimmers can entwine fates and connect dreams, just as how its glimmer links stars into the shapes of a heart's desire. No matter the distance apart, guided by the stone's glimmer, the fated will meet under the stars. Dissecting this, it's possible that these fates allow the traveler to weave together people's paths so that they can meet them. Consider it like the travelers physically manipulating fate and the possibility of them adventuring together. There is a universe this doesn't succeed, and there's a universe where it does. In the end, it's so that the voice lines that we get with them are somehow considered canon despite not meeting them in the cutscenes. The masterless Stardust and the masterless Starglitter also hint of the traveler being able to create new destinies altogether. But we cut off with the next important part of the traveler's ability to manipulate fate. A dialogue from the Tevat trailer is said by Dainsleif to the traveler, one that revolves around weaving the fate of others.
Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her. Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave.
The word weave here is used in reference to another aspect of the character's profile. If you go into the traveler's in-game profile, you see that there is something known as the Loom of Fate. The Loom of Fate was also referenced in 1.4 as being a part of the Abyss Order's plan.
Engulf the faith of an enemy in flame, and bring glory to Her Highness the Princess.
What? Is that what it says?
Loom of Fate initial operation. They, the Abyss, seem to be carrying out a large operation. The keyword here is Loom of Fate. It seems like they are still launching the operation, or rather, are still conducting preliminary tests.
Loom of Fate? What's that? Is it literally a fate-weaving machine?
The Loom of Fate is a multi-phased plan of the Abyss that is still currently unknown to us. What we do know was that the first part involved Osial's resurrection.
They won't just corrupt Osial's mind. They also plan to use the ancient technology behind the field tillers to completely transform Osial's body.
Is that even possible?
Only the Abyss Order has consistently sought out the remnants of Khaenri'ah. Despite being far from human, they seek out this lost human civilization quite persistently.
The weaving of destiny is attributed to three divine entities known as Fates. These are three divine goddesses who shape the destiny of each human, often expressed in textile metaphors, such as spinning fibers into yarn or weaving threads on a loom. The Greek iteration of these fates was known as moirai. Clotho was the one responsible for determining a human's birth and how they lived. Like Kisis measured the thread of life allotted to each person with her measuring rod, she represents the thread of life in a person's longevity in this world. Atropos was the cutter of the thread of life. She chose the manner of each person's death, and when their time comes, she cut their life thread with her abhorred shears. The loom of fate being referenced to both the traveler twins is an interesting concept, and we can connect Osial's resurrection with Clotho's first aspect of birth. Osial will be born anew by the mechanization of his body, hence resetting his thread of life. But I want to return to this later. The word that Dane's leaf says is Reweave. The traveler isn't expected to create new destinies with the loom, but instead find a way to fix or manipulate the threads themselves. I want to consider the last part of the loom of fate, Atropos, or the end of the thread of life.
Once upon a time, the people of the land could hear revelations from the heavens directly. Then, the envoys of the gods would walk among benighted humanity, and the ancient flames were extinguished amongst the first fallen rain. It was a prosperous time, a period of bountiful harvest. Then the earth was blessed and ruled by heaven, and the elemental flows were smooth and well-ordained. 100 years of bounty were written in the stars, and none could change this divine law. But what of the time after? 100? 1,000 years from now? Would they have famine where they had plenty? Poverty where once were riches? Would their altars and palaces become one with the soil, with only that silver-white tree for companionship? The heavenly envoys, whoever spoke what they knew, were silent. So to understand this doom, the chief priest, head crowned with white branches, would delve into the deep places of the world. Each retiring chief priest offers up their crown of flawless white branches to this world. Every mighty and ancient city, and every austere place of sacrifice, must one day return to profundity in the earth. All prosperity must someday end, but this does not mean that nothing is eternal. At the end of the cycle, the earth shall be renewed. Thus, eternity is cyclical. The search for truth is a product of prosperity, and not the seed that plants it.